What are death and roll, black and roll, and entombedcore? These three styles blend variants of extreme metal with hard rock, thus making these a bit more accessible and fun to jam to than the harsher sound of extreme metal subgenres, but most likely still sounds like abrasive noise to your average Joe rock fan. Starting with death and roll, it is a combination of death metal and hard rock. The band Entombed is often credited with kicking off this style on their album Wolverine Blues. Entombed started off as a normal death metal band, as did many other death and roll groups. So if you are trying to get into this style, just be aware of this. Other death metal bands that became death and roll artists are Gorefest, Dismember, and Unleashed. Death and roll was a style that primarily existed in the 90s and seems to have faded away in the early 2000s. Even the famous metal band Carcass has experimented with the death and roll sound on their album Swan Song. Although blending it with a little melodic death metal. The band Cataclysm also did a death and roll / melodic death metal hybrid on some of their material.
I slither down your spine, slither. I take your life away.
Of course, I can't make a death and roll video without mentioning 6 Feet Under, who honestly might be solely responsible for the poor reputation of the genre. Now admittedly, some of their original material isn't terrible for what it is, but I think the reason that they are mocked so relentlessly is for their infamously awful covers of AC/DC and other classics.
For all that I can get, if you know what I mean.
This combined with the at times comical vocals of Chris Barnes, which somehow even sound completely different from other death and roll vocalists, let alone the type of rock singing that the average person is familiar with, and you have a recipe for a band that is treated like a joke, and a style of music that is completely disregarded. More damaging to the reputation of death and roll, however, than normies laughing at Cookie Monster AC/DC covers, is none other than death metal fans themselves. Everyone knows that metal elitism exists, but nobody hates death and roll quite as much as death metal fans. And I do get it, it is different, and if you just don't like the death and roll sound, I can see why it would be frustrating that all these death metal titans jumped on this bandwagon in the 90s and did their own rendition of Wolverine Blues. But just because it's different doesn't mean it's inherently bad. I quite like the style personally. So for one more recommendation, here's Birds of Prey. Oh god, not that one, this one.
My ears been back. Now my mind was right.
Now, that's better.
Black and roll, I think goes without saying, is a blend of black metal and hard rock. Unlike death and roll, however, black and roll didn't really kick off until the early 2000s. This style is slightly harder to define than death and roll because early black metal artists such as Venom were very speed metal inspired, and speed metal has a very rock and roll quality to it.
Lay down your soul to the gods, rock and roll.
This is often referred to as the first wave of black metal, and this wave of black metal is very rock and roll oriented. So bands like Midnight, that are often called black and roll, are more like a revival of the first wave black metal than what I'm talking about here.
Rock and roll.
This style, often referred to as black and roll, is more like a heavier variant of speed metal than any type of metal and roll. The black and roll sound that I am talking about is the one that Satyricon had on Now Diabolical. This sound is more in line with the theme of this video and these subgenres, and is like the black metal version of Wolverine Blues. But I think it goes without saying that the difference between this Satyricon black and roll and the Midnight style black and roll is night and day. So keep in mind that I am referring to the Satyricon one, and I'm sure there are many that prefer the Midnight style of black and roll, and that's perfectly fine. Another artist that has done black and roll in the Satyricon sense is Forgotten Tomb. Forgotten Tomb has experimented with quite a few styles of metal, but I believe that they have strong black and roll vibes on some of their 2010s works. Vreed, or maybe Vride, I'm probably mispronouncing that, is another that has dabbled in black and roll, albeit with a strong melodic black metal influence. They even covered Paint It Black by the Rolling Stones, which is a decent cover, at least a lot better than most of 6 Feet Under's covers. Take, again I'm probably butchering it, is some more black and roll, though again, with some melodic black metal influence. Another band with a similar blend is Cloak, who very much have a sound halfway between Satyricon and Watain. Now, for Entombedcore. As mentioned, Entombed was a death metal / death and roll band, and they had a very distinct guitar tone. Entombedcore takes that Wolverine Blues sound and blends in some crust punk. I suppose you could think of this style as death and roll core, or perhaps even grindcore and roll, but perhaps putting these types of labels on it is missing the point, as Entombedcore very much has its own vibe. Trap Them is a great embodiment of the style. My personal favorite is Black Breath, who mix Entombedcore with thrash metal. And also Volunfire, who blend Entombedcore with death doom metal. And on the more hardcore side of things, bands like Nails and Dead in the Dirt also get labeled as Entombedcore, though they are quite inspired by power violence as well. So, now you know about these metal and roll subgenres. 3 styles which accompany 3 decades. And if I had to guess the theme of these genres, it would be the strife of the individual. Death and roll, I'd argue, often evokes a feeling of taking on the world yourself. Black and roll is perhaps a bit more idiosyncratic, maybe necessitating a by any means necessary approach to taking on the world yourself. Finally, Entombedcore in the 2010s represents a sense of powerlessness in this pursuit. You fought the world, but the world ultimately defeated you. Now I'm speaking broadly, of course. You can let me know if I'm completely off base here. This is just my theory of what these styles represent. But let me know what you think in the comments. Regardless, these are very cool sounds, and styles that I quite enjoy. Our acculturation continues as we explore metal's overcomplicated genres.
Joy in the